Stumble forward, stumble forward. The 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 stumble.
I'd like to welcome Raine Maida to the Stumble Forward. Raine is a Canadian musician best known as being the lead vocalist and primary songwriter of the band Our Lady Peace. He's a multi-award-winning artist, producer, and entrepreneur. Our Lady Peace won 2 Juno Awards and absolutely dominated MuchMusic and the Canadian radio waves in the late 90s into the 2000s. They were hugely successful and headlined major festivals and arena tours throughout Canada and the US. They put out a fantastically artistic new record in 2022 called Spiritual Machines 2. Raine is an ambitious, tech-minded artist and business person, and I'm over the moon to be able to chat with him today. Welcome, Raine Maida. How are you?
Happy to be here. I'm great, Huxley. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great too. I've been listening to your interviews. I listened to the new record, and there's a million things I want to ask you about. A lot of your recent work and your entrepreneurial stuff really fascinates me. But if you don't mind, can we talk a little bit about this band that made you famous, Our Lady Peace, which, thinking about them this morning, I've been sort of reliving in my mind how dominant you were. On my local radio station here in Peterborough, Freak 90.5, they play the heck out of Our Lady Peace. They play the new single all the time. I've been singing it in my head all morning. I guess I want to jump right into the fact that, you were the biggest band in Canada, and I was looking at the 20 noms, the Juno noms, and then 2 wins. You guys suffered some political headwinds by being the biggest thing in a country that sort of has a tall poppy syndrome. Am I getting too dark too soon? I guess what I'm saying is, now that I'm older and I feel like my age has sort of separated me from my ego, I can kind of look at the politicking that went on in my early career and, the jockeying for position. And you guys, by being the top, we're going to naturally see criticism from people who were jealous or whatever. Can you kind of put into words what it was like being the biggest band in the country back in those days and what it was to kind of be, I'm just curious about the politics, really.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I got sick of myself for a while. The way the business was back then, you had very few channels. So it was MuchMusic. I don't think we got MTV up in Canada. And it was radio. And if you were embraced by those 2 channels, then you were everywhere. And it felt like for the first 10 years of our career, we were everywhere a lot. But I think my armor against that was we just tore our butts off, and I think that was always part of the game in terms of, having your label and having the ability to get on those channels. But for me, it was always about live. Like, can we go out there and can we bring people into these rooms, whether they're clubs or arenas, and kind of blow their minds and turn them into real fans? Because the other stuff is great for awareness, but at the end of the day, you have to, if you're a rock band, you have to show it live. And so we did that, and not just in Canada, kind of around the world, and definitely in America. On that first album, The Vide, we had a little school bus. I remember a guitar player built basically he could weld for some reason. He was great at welding, and he did this incredible, you couldn't break into this. You'd have to steal the van. You couldn't get our gear. There's no way you're getting your gear. And we put 450,000 miles on that little school bus before it broke down, touring across Canada, but mostly America. So I think being in the work was the best or the easiest way to diffuse any criticism or even, like I said, just overplay.
What is it about the rock archetype that we have to hide our ambition? I know that, in some ways the rock archetype was established in the 1960s and we're kind of still living on it. I feel hip hop has opened up the idea that you can be more openly ambitious, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I actually, there were a few bands that were, or at least had that ilk to them. Oasis always talked about being the biggest band in the world. And I always felt it kind of funny though. I think ambition for me was never about trying to be the biggest band in Canada or anywhere else. It was simply about that connection and making a true connection. So I just always kept that kind of in the front. And to be honest, I've never been a person to look back. I've always been that type of artist who's not saying the next song you write is going to be the best song, but it was always about what can we do next. And even when we were on the road touring, it was always, I was in the back of the bus, I had little, back to like a portable, like 4-track cassette player to the digital stuff to actually building a little Pro Tools rig. Like I was always writing. The creative never stopped for me. And so that kind of, I don't know. It was a pleasant and beautiful distraction in a way.
The funny thing
From the
is,
business, I mean.
Yeah, well, when I think back to the days of in the 90s when MuchMusic was this juggernaut and you guys enjoyed, I mean, your career has seen a lot of shifts in paradigm. You had, you were a part of the real record business back in the day, back when there was radio outlets, a robust print media scene, MuchMusic. Getting the message out to Canadians, writ large via these big publicity tools was an amazing thing. You seem to be riding this movement into the future without fear. That excites me because I feel like I personally branded myself like a Luddite for a long time. And then really in the last 10 or 12 years, realized what a lost cause that is to sort of resist moving forward for in favor of somehow wanting to romanticize the past. I don't know why, if it felt like it was more artistic, but I very much admire the fact that you seem to have had your eye on the ball in a forward movement like a lot of artists wouldn't. Again, that sort of feels like part of a want to be ambitious, a want to connect in new ways. Do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it was Napster. I mean, look, I love the idea. Like I was saying, even on the tour bus, like for me as a creative, just as a songwriter alone, technology was amazing. Like getting to these little, I remember I can't remember what it's called, Roland D something. It was a 16-track digital recorder. When I got that, it was like, wow, this is awesome. Like this makes it so much easier to actually, write and produce a song in a hotel room in the back of the bus. And then it came, Pro Tools came, and all of a sudden that made it even simpler. And now we didn't actually maybe have to spend the kind of money we were spending on studio time. And so the democratization of music on that level, on the creative level, was incredible. Right? And that's technology, right? Driving it forward. On the other side, technology, there's always an underbelly. There's great things that happen with technology, but there's always a downside. And so the downside really when Napster hit was like, okay, as an artist, that revenue stream of selling music is probably going away. It wasn't going to go away right away when Napster launched, but you could see this trend happening. And I was really just hyper aware of that. And again, I love having 1 million songs on my phone as well. But at the end of the day, what it did, it's diluted the value of music in a sense. Now, it's really difficult to fight these big technological advancements that happen. We're seeing it in every sector, and especially with AI coming. But I felt like, okay, let's not fight it, but I need to find a way to preserve what creatives and artists have and the ability just to build sustainable careers, because that's what I saw happening. And you fast forward from like MySpace, which was actually kind of a cool platform where I could wake up in any given morning and I'd see, hey, there's 128 fans in Houston. I want our lead piece to play there. This was like data. This was actually good information. Real fans saying, come to our city, could show that to our agent, could show that to our managers, be like, hey, we need to get there. You fast forward 10 years and now it's the social media giants that we all rely on as artists. But I will say this, the dirty little secret in the business is that the middle class of music is in a crisis. And if we don't fix it, and it's all about data ownership, if we don't fix it, if we don't take control of our careers, it's going to become a hobby for most of the people over the next 10 years. And the real kind of the flip of it for us is we can't allow our fans to leave our shows anonymous. The ability to rely on these big social media platforms to reach our fans doesn't work. And so we are reliant on a third party system that owns, controls, and monetizes our fan data. And that just doesn't work anymore.
Fascinating stuff. And I do want to go here. I just quickly, though, want to talk a little bit about how artful Our Lady Peace music is. I mean, I get to hear a lot of it on the local radio station. And again, having come from the Toronto Queen Street scene back in the day, you know, all the big bands, the Hip, anybody who was kind of backed by a major label and was well known around MuchMusic tended to get a lot of criticism from the Now magazines and what have you. And I think back to just the egoic nature of that kind of whatever that jousting is that was happening. But when I think back to what a beautifully articulated and lyrical band you guys are and how innovative the melodies are and were, I'm even referring to the new record, like, I guess I think back and I hear a deeply artistic vision in Our Lady Peace. I interviewed Matt Good recently. Again, another guy who, you know, maybe took it on the chin in the media, but another great lyricist. Like, there was a lot of great lyric writing happening in Canada, and it was given to the public in a major way. To me, this feels almost exciting in hindsight. I don't think I was able to see it back then. I can see it now, that it was a very artistic movement that was happening in the mainstream in Canada. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yeah, I mean, my perception of what the band is probably much different from a fan's perspective or someone that just knew us from like those typical channels that we're talking about, whether it's video or radio. I fought our record companies all along about what songs should be released, because whatever went out there was what kind of defined you as an artist, you know, and for a lot of people that was what they knew, and those, you know, singles or hit songs were what kind of, you know, helped them shape what OLP was. But for me, there was always stuff deeper that we tried to get through on a more like commercial level, but you know, labels are labels. But we were also never a band. Even for the new record we're making right now, we've never been a band to like repeat ourselves and repeat that success, probably to our detriment. And if you really were going to be honest about it, you know, we didn't do Clumsy Part 2 after Clumsy. We probably should have. We should have just tried to copy what we did and expand on it, or not copy it, but expand on it. We didn't. We went totally left, and we made Spiritual Machines, concept record based on Ray Kurzweil and an incredible book he had called The Age of Spiritual Machines. You know, really different type of sonics and music. And then we made Gravity with Bob Rock, which was back to kind of like a rock record that did extremely well, you know, around the world. But we didn't copy it again. We didn't try to expand on that once we were, you know, having that success. And I think that's what's made this journey exciting for me as an artist. That's what's made it sustainable in my mind, because you know, having like a playbook on how to write songs has never been something I was attracted to, and so I think that's been the lifeblood of is change and evolution and just experimentation. You know, obviously we're all Bowie fans. You know, the way he experimented was always something I held in high esteem, and so we're still trying to do that to this day.
I've got a theory that, you know, artists with very long and successful careers, it's almost inevitable that they disappoint their fans. And I'm actually kind of wondering if it's important to disappoint your fans now and again, just to kind of keep the dynamism in that relationship. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That feels more like, I think we look inward more, at least I do as an artist. To me, the idea of being inspired as a creative entity is really what it comes down to, because, you know, like it's not an easy business. Like making records can be fun, but they can also be expensive and trying, and then touring them can be the same thing. And going back to the idea on the tech side, like the margins on touring become so small for artists that if you don't have a direct connect to your fans, you're probably dead. And so the idea of my platform Fan Job is to help solve that. But to your question, it looks glamorous from the outside, but it's a lot to be an artist these days. So like I was saying, I really look inward, and if I feel inspired by the music, then it gives me the energy to go take it out there. If I was just kind of like rinse and repeat on songs and the types of songs we wrote because they were hits,
yeah,
like you say, maybe that disappoints fans, but it doesn't just disappoint me. And I think that's the true kind of like unlock to having a long career.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, really listened with a lot of delight to the new record. I mean, the single "Stop Making Stupid People Famous" is played constantly on our local station, so which is indicative of the fact that your band still has the power, that you aren't just a legacy artist, that radio still wants to hear new work from you. And when I listen to the whole record, like I said in the intro, it's very artistic. It's unabashedly artistic. It's not clumsy. It's not the 90s indie rock thing that I would have known from the radio and from MuchMusic. It does sound like, to be honest, I wrote in my notes that it sounds like a band that's still trying to get fans. Like, it sounds like there's that urgency and vitality of a band that's still trying hard. Am I missing something, or is that what's really happening?
Yeah, again, to me, it just comes back down to inspiration. And I was able to work on that record with Dave Siddick. So Dave Siddick, a key member, writer, and TV on the Radio, one of my favorite bands of all time, produces the Yeah, tons of great bands, came from the kind of Brooklyn indie scene. But he's always been up there in terms of his production style and just his choices musically and sonically, as someone that I just actually never thought I'd work with, to be honest. But he doesn't live far from me in LA. And we had a demo of that song, and I thought, man, like, Dave would kill this. Like, Dave would add, just the right elements, and he would get it, and some of the other stuff we were writing as well. And so we just sent him the song. And I think he didn't listen to it at first. And his manager got back to our manager, was like, yeah, Dave's busy. He's doing his art. He's working on a new Yeah's record, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, man, I know with this guy, just knowing from following him and knowing his like philosophy of life and art, he would really get this. And probably his first instinct is that I'm not working with, some alt rock band from the 90s. And so I just said to my manager, just like, please just make sure that he heard it. So he went back, manager kind of said, yeah, okay, I'll make sure he actually listens. He listened right away. Like 10 minutes later, I got a call. I was like, hey, Dave wants you to come up to the studio. So it really is about that. Like it's about the idea that after 20 plus years making records, I can walk into someone's studio, have a conversation, try a song with someone, and feel like I was 18 again. And that's what Dave brought. He just brought this newness. Like I'm not a modular guy. He has this massive modular wall in his studio. So he's messing around with different rhythms for that song and different sound effects and stuff. And he's got, every old synth in the world. And this is a guy that's devoted his life to music. Like that's all he does. And so to be around that, like I said, after, 20, 25 years, it was like a kid in the candy store, and the inspiration was so pure. And so, to finish a whole album with Dave was just like, I could have died afterward and felt like, what, I ended up where I wanted to be. Obviously that's not the case. It's actually inspired us even more, but yeah, you have to push and you have to fight, for those creative moments and surround yourself with people that are going to make you feel a sense of humility in terms of what your skill set is, how you view music, where you can still learn, because I think music is an organic creature like that. And so if you're always pushing forward and trying to find those people that can help elevate your sense of creativity, it's like, man, it's magic.
This deeply philosophical side of you that comes through the lyrics and comes through in this conversation, I'm contrasting it in my mind as we speak with the sort of the sexy rock god that was kind of the brand banner of the Our Lady Peace thing, all the while now thinking about the fact that you would have always been this burning, vital, creative creature underneath all of the branding and photo shoots and stuff. I'm kind of wondering, why didn't I know this? Why didn't I know that Raine Maida was like this restless, super creative? Maybe that just wasn't a part of how the band was going to be sold in those days. But going back and listening to the old music and then hearing the new record, which does sound like a definitive statement to me, to be completely honest, I kind of feel in some ways like I was cheated about who the real guy behind this music may have been all those years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the commerce side of music, and you sign with a label like we did with Columbia or Sony, and I was young and kind of, not that I wasn't engaged in the business side of it, but there's only so much you can control, unfortunately. Like I think the idea of being an indie artist is almost like I see the value in that today. so intensely because having that control is profound. But we gave up that control a bit to, you know, get someone to pay for our albums and help us break around the world. And with that comes the ability for them to like put out what they think is going to work best. And like I said, we fought a lot. I probably almost got dropped a few times because there was videos we made where I was like, I can't put this out. Like in good conscience as an artist, I don't want anyone to see this. Like I'm not comfortable with it. And I remember our president in New York was basically like, you got to do this or you're not on a label anymore. And I actually stuck. It was the first video for a song we had called Life. And I was just like, this is the cheesiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'd rather quit music than have it out there. But at the same time, there was compromises all along the way. It's not that we were, you know, there's a few shirts I regret in like photo shoots that I wore maybe. But overall, I think we were allowed to make the music we wanted to make.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff you're talking about, I always look at it as a journey, and I'm really happy where we're getting to now. So no regrets, definitely.
Let's move to this business stuff. You're talking about Web3, which fascinates me. You still have this artistic side of you driving your business mind. I saw an Andy Warhol documentary last year where in Andy's last years, he talked openly about wanting to create a beautiful business. And it warmed my heart because I think in some ways as, again, rock artists, the archetype is supposed to somehow have no understanding of their own business or their own understanding of their power within the context. And I always found that, again, that it just didn't play out for me. I think as Canadian indie artists and as Canadian artists, like we have to be our biggest champions a lot of times. So the idea of sort of resting on our laurels and playing the role of somebody who doesn't know or doesn't care, it was never going to work because somebody's got to care or else you're dead, right? So this idea of building a beautiful business to me is not just a statement about money or the want to have some sort of business impact. It's kind of proof of connection in a way. Does this idea resonate with you, this build a beautiful business?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. Like it's disheartening that as an artist these days, you almost have to take the business side or you have to balance it off with the artistic side. When we were coming up, we were just artists. Like, yeah, we kind of knew the business and stuff, but I spent most of my days, you know, learning new chord progressions and chord shapes and trying different melodies. I was an artist. I was writing songs or performing. I had people in an infrastructure that took care of most of the other stuff. That's not it's just reality. Like the paradigm shift on the technological side and where we've ended up in terms of how you market music and creators these days is just so different from when we started that there's just no way around it. Like you can't be a new artist without understanding that stuff and doing that stuff half of your time now. So I think it takes away from the art, but the trade-off that's amazing is that you get to own it. Like you can get to a certain point now where you don't have to give up any publishing. You don't have to sign a record deal. You can control the message. You can control your image. Obviously, we were talking about that. I gave a little bit of that up to sign with the label. But it's definitely, it's a brave new world and you can't not pay attention. I think about the connection you're talking about, which is what I, kind of been yelling or preaching from the mountaintops for the last few years is if you're going to build a community, and we all do that now on these different social media giants, the most important community is the direct one to your fans. And not to be self-serving here, Hoxie, but like we've been building this platform called FanDrop for the last few years. And it is exactly about empowering artists to own that connection, not let these third parties control and own and monetize your audience anymore. And I think that is essentially the only way we survive because, we get it, like shares, likes, and follows. That's not going to pay. It's not going to put, gas in the tank to get from, Kelowna to Calgary. Right. So if you're not directly connected to your fans and are able to create this kind of, cottage industry, you're done. It's just, I hate to say that, it breaks my heart, but the alternative is that we have a generation of musicians who can't build careers. So that's a bunch of songs unwritten, these careers kind of undefined. And that's really sad. But we're in that crisis state right now in the business. And like I said before, it's a bit of a dirty little secret. James Blake, who's an artist I admire, had a really, really incredible post a few weeks ago. He just talked about, like streaming doesn't pay properly. The big social platforms aren't our friends, and the margins on touring are razor thin. And this is a guy who sells out like the Hollywood Bowl or the Bud Stage in Toronto. But when you get an artist like that saying this system is broken, this business of music is broken, that's why for me, fan drop is like really the only answer. So if you go into a show and you let those fans walk away anonymous, it's basically shame on you at this point.
Tech bro is a pejorative, and
Yeah.
like I've been a sort of a very quiet watcher and fascinated with Web3, crypto, NFTs. I feel like with the last crypto winter and the big NFT speculation phase, it sort of put the people who aren't maybe watching it as closely as I would be or you would be, it was a major turnoff. Obviously with crypto sort of being where it is today, it's up, who knows when this podcast is released where it'll be, but so it's sort of found its favor again. But what is it about the future that we are so resistant to? Why is a tech bro such a pejorative? Why is the want to create new systems that might serve us better in the future? Why is it portrayed so negatively? What is it we're afraid of?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of change. I think that requires bandwidth that maybe we don't have or don't want to commit to something that's new. But if you look back on music and we didn't embrace technology, like I said, the ability to democratize the space on a recording front with all these platforms, whether it's Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools. Imagine if we didn't have that, we'd be shut out, most musicians. And who can spend, it was $1,500 a day to get into a studio back then. Now you don't have to spend that money. So anybody can make music. Anybody can upload music because of DSPs. That's a great thing. Like I said, there's an underbelly and a downside to all those things. And that's the fact that revenue stream has been taken away. But yeah, you can't snub your nose at technology. It's there and it's coming and it's changing whether you like it or not. I do think Web3 was interesting because it had all this potential, but the NFT craze and the way it was kind of hijacked by people that were just trying to make money off it really soured it for a lot of people. But the pillars of what Web3 have are still really present and very much in terms of what I'm doing with Fan Drop, in terms of like having that direct connect, getting paid directly, being able to own your data. Like those are transparency. Like those are key pillars of Web3, whether it's on the blockchain or not, that we've brought into Fan Drop. And so, it's these, a couple steps forward, maybe 3 steps back kind of thing. And I think technology's always been that way. But at the end of the day, if you're an artist, you can leverage some of these pillars that I'm talking about to really advance your career and to build something that's sustainable. Because without it, I do think you get left behind, and I think music becomes a hobby for the middle class of artists out there.
It's, to me, again, I feel like the most recent OLP record is a true artistic statement. And I feel like in a couple of interviews, I heard you kind of compare the dualities of artist, which now equals content creator, and art equals content, which I feel like those of us born in the 20th century who did the majority of our sort of development in the 20th century bristle against this idea. I still do. I feel like my podcast is a way for me to stay present on the social media front by doing something that still remains very artistic and vital to me, instead of just content for content's sake, which I tried for some years. Do you have any thoughts around this, art versus content, and just how the diminishment of this property as it affects our lives or doesn't affect our lives, it sort of positions it almost as a subterranean concern, whereas music was my damn life. It still is, but I mean, when I was a kid, music was number one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said it, like we're all creators now. And with that brings, I don't know if it's a burden, but it definitely feels like we're being tasked with more than maybe we're capable of. Unless you grew up in this creative world, like in the last 10 or 15 years, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the relevance is that we all need to get in the data game, but it's also understanding, again, talking about that downside, is these algorithms that are out there is what we're fighting against. And there is no more, the algorithms aren't built for discovery. I think that's where you said, you know, when you talk about tech bros and understanding that it's really key information, because if you start to understand that these algorithms are meant to keep us in a box, right? They're not meant to help people. You put something out there. Oh, yeah. It's not meant for discovery. It's meant just to get people that like that. They're just going to get fed more of that, but they're not going to blow you up. Even the idea of going viral these days is being diminished by these algorithms, because it's all about, you know, revenue and commerce. So I think it's important to understand that. At the end of the day, it's really about authenticity. And I think if we learn anything from something like TikTok that works, it was the fact that, hey, it doesn't need to look shiny and new. It doesn't need to be expensive. You can do something that's really authentic and like literally just holding up a camera, setting it aside and playing your song. And that can really react with a lot of fans. I love that component of it. It has to be a balance. I think that's the only key, because no matter what, I think the craft of music is still what stands out. And if you're going to, you know, build a career, I think it's about getting excellent at what you do. It's funny. I had this conversation. We opened up did some shows with the Pumpkins last year, and I was having this conversation with Billy Corgan backstage, and we are just talking about this exact thing and how social media is seems to be such a burden for most people, most artists anyway. And we're just talking about excellence, and like, excellence in your craft and music will always rise above. It might take longer to get out there, but putting in those 10,000 hours, if you believe that philosophy, or just getting to the point where your craft shines above any social media post or anything that you could do. I think that if you're going to bet on something, bet on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. This feels very 20th century to me. I was mildly obsessed with the F1 documentary program on Netflix, and there was a French driver who was obsessed with his becoming an icon, but he was winning no races, and he was likening himself to becoming a Michael Jordan or a Mike Tyson. And I was thinking to myself, again, I'm going to sound very old and ridiculous, but there's a generation that understands the power of the icon, but wants to get there through the back way. And if you're not winning, or if you're not creating that excellence, if you're not doing what Michael Jordan did, if you're not doing what Mike Tyson did, if you're not putting in those hours, creating that excellence, then it's the cart before the horse thing becomes quite monumental in this sort of, I want to become an icon before I want to become truly great at my craft. It sort of feels to me like, do we all need to sit down and have a big discussion about how this works? Like, what foot goes in front of the other in terms of creating artists that are going to have a long-term and lasting effect on the public? Why are we out of step with this at the moment?
Yeah, it's funny. I've kind of changed my philosophy. Like, I have 3 young boys, or not young, but teenage boys. We are definitely not dream killers in this house, but there's a reality. And I spoke at South by last week, and it was interesting. It was like this. It was a meetup. I did a few panels, but the last thing I did was a meetup, and it was really interesting. It was about 200 artists or people from the music business in this room, and everyone got to ask questions. And this one woman said, you know, she's exactly the dilemma we're talking about. She spends half her day creating social media posts and trying to push her out there and get some virality going. And then the other half of their day trying to write songs, and she's a producer as well. And she says, some weeks I'll just be doing content and I'll forget, oh my God, I got to write some new songs too. But I think the idea is that it's more important to understand or identify what you're actually great at. So if you love music and you write songs, but you're great at social media, you should be doing that more, because that is your like strategic and maybe unfair advantage over someone else. But if you're just a great songwriter and you're okay at social media, focus on the music and just be the best, like find that excellence in your songwriting. Because I think the idea that you can do it all, actually, and maybe this is coming full circle, I don't think that's always true. I think you do have to find the excellence, but it could be as a creator in terms of how you make your social media content or that could be what you're great at. I think we're in that day and age where that's not a bad thing. Not me, definitely not me. And it sounds like not you, but for some people, that is their strength.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing that. I am seeing that. I think maybe the comment about excellence, I know one of your boys, you were proudly putting up his basketball powers and agility and excitement. And it's like, clearly, I got thinking about the parental units behind a kid who is excelling at anything. Like, I was just naturally tuned to want to excel. I don't have kids. I think if I did, I'd be probably a bit of a monstrous dad wanting to push my kid to excel too. My whole life has been predicated on my want to make something great, you know, and I feel like it's how I understand and relate to life. And in some ways, listening to you talk on other interviews as I've been leading up to this talk, I hear another like mind in that. I think, well, this guy kind of gets it in that way where I felt I heard you say over and over again that you can't just sell junk. At the end of the day, junk is junk, and humans are still authentic and organic enough creatures that we still smell junk a mile away. This part feels to me like there's been no change with, we're, 1/3 into the 21st century. And I don't feel like we're any less able to detect something that's not worth our time. Do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, the arts has always had this weird, like there's always been a huge romanticism and fascination about the arts, where it's just something that's like bestowed upon us as creators, and it just happens when it happens. And yeah, there's some work obviously that goes into it, but I've always felt this, not resentment, but like friction with that, because I know how hard I've had to work, and not everyone sees it. And you've seen the same thing, where I finally saw a post, and again, go back to social media, but I saw a post that was really interesting. It was I can't remember the actor's name, but like a, tried and true, like career actor, someone like a Ben Kingsley. It wasn't him, but came on and said, hey, your friends who are doctors and lawyers and engineers, and how much time they spent at doing that business or craft. That's what you need to do as an actor or as a musician as well. Like, don't get it twisted. It's not something that's just, you're not just going to wake up and you feel inspired and you write this hit song. Of course that happens, but it's only because of the work you put in before that and being open and prepared for it to happen. But you have to work as hard as those people at your craft if you want to achieve that excellence. Otherwise, you are romanticizing, art, whether it's music, painting, or even being an actor. And I feel that was so on point, because even the great actors, the nuances of what they do on screen, it's incredible, and it's because of the work they put in. Doesn't just happen because they wanted to be an actor and hit all the streets and did all the auditions. There's so much work behind the scenes, and so that's kind of where I sit now with art and anything around or even all the peripheral stuff that you need to make it as an artist. Like you said, the business side of it, got to put in the work.
Yeah, all of this is true. All of this is true. And it's a bummer, yet it's exciting in a way that these new avenues do open us up to an exciting new world that it's taken me about 10 or 12 years to understand that resisting it is not worth it. Having kids, is that give you some sort of edge? Are you able to sort of see what it is they're listening to, what they're watching? Like, are you taking in what they're taking in? Are you staying current?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think we don't give kids enough value in terms of like their perception of the world, their ideas, their unfiltered kind of sensibilities. And so I kind of locked myself in this studio here right before Christmas for 10 days. Literally, like, kind of slept in here. I had all these ideas. We hadn't recorded music. I hadn't really written for a minute. I was working on fan drops like 18 hours a day. But I had like the energy. I was like, there's something happening on a musical side where I need to express myself. So I wrote and recorded like 14 songs. But this one song that we just recorded down in Nashville, called Sound the Alarm, I'd written some different choruses for it. And kind of, my oldest son, who's also a musician, he'd come in and hear some stuff, but that's pretty cool. And I changed a chorus just by, I started overthinking things as naturally you do as an artist. And I changed a chorus. And one day he kind of knocked on the door. He's like, I was like, hey, come on in, Ro. And he said, what happened to that chorus? And I said, oh, it just like some of the notes were bugging me, or there was something that wasn't right with it. So I think this is better. And he just sat down and he was like, play it again for me. And it was a very weird experience. He was like, play the song. So I played the song again for him. And he just looked at me and he said, like, you lost that initial spark for me. Like, it might not have been perfect, but what it was so raw and so perfect that everything that's happening now just feels, I don't know, feels too worked on, feels too labored over. And I've never taken advice from one of my kids on a song or a part of a song, but the way he said it and the way he looked at me, and it was true. Like, he totally just felt something that was lost musically. And so, man, it's not even that, out of the mouth of babes kind of philosophy. It was just sometimes like the unfilteredness and the ability just to tap into what's really real from our children is, man, like, it is beyond profound. And I went back to the original and we recorded it a few weeks ago in Nashville, and he was absolutely right. And without that comment, I might have stuck with a new one.
And that's in some ways, I mean, I think there's a lot of like clinics and pop songwriting on the new record. In a way, like, as a technician, you get better and better and better. You've written songs for Carrie Underwood. You've written songs for Kelly Clarkson. Like, it's not like you don't know what good symmetry, good craft looks like. And so there you are with a person who's got this 30 years plus of experience looking at this thing like probably like a piece of mathematics. Not to say that you are wholly removed from it emotionally, because I know that's not true. But I also know, too, from being a technician, like, what I love about pop songwriting is how deeply I can go into the symmetry and the craft, and how I can impregnate it with surprise and all this stuff. I get it's an intellectual exercise that I can probably myself get sort of railroaded away from just, oh, does my gut still like this? Is this still feel important?
Yeah, it's that raw emotion that usually starts an idea. I think the ability to tap into an emotion, get that out through, whatever, whether it's rhythms or chord shapes or something that, synergizes in a song that makes you feel, but then you can over process and overthink things. But it goes back to, again, like, I think the most important artistically, especially as we grow up, what was it, Van Gogh? We're all born creative. The key is to, like, hold on to it for dear life kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The ability to stay open, even when you can write songs and how things work and like you said, the math of it all or the science of it all, but being open to collaboration, man, it's even on that kind of level. Like, that is collaborative. Having your son tell you something that is, not, I would never get offended by it, but like, to actually be open to what he's saying and realize that, oh my goodness, you're right. That is, that's kind of the key. It's still being open to that kind of collaboration on whatever level it comes. But man, so important. And literally this song, Sound the Alarm, really set the tone for our whole new record that we're doing right now. And so it's wild. I haven't actually thanked him yet for that, but it's something I plan to do very soon. I
mean, so I hear the hours that go into your side hustles. I know the hours of work. I know you're a dedicated family person. I guess hearing about your collaborating with the fellow from TV on the Radio, it illuminates this vision I have of you that I'm going to insert one of my own stories here as well, about how you're still searching. And I'm not exactly sure how you have the time to fit that in, but that you still have your thumb on the pulse. I mean, after the Mounties record came out, whatever that was, 10 years ago, I got an unsolicited text or email from you, and I don't even know how you maybe got my contacts, and you just went on. You had a very, very positive and kind email about your thoughts on Mounties. And I was like, I mean, it was the first time in a way that I woke up from seeing you as a guy on TV and a rock star to being, this guy's in my inbox talking about my little band from Vancouver with my buds. Like, what is this guy doing? How does he know? Why is this on his radar? It really gave me a dynamic view of you that I couldn't have, am I making sense here?
Yeah. I mean, look, we're all,
And I'm
I
not
think
looking to be. I don't want to be. I don't want you to comment about the band. It's to me. I was like, this guy is watching the world, like in a way that I would. If somebody said, "Do you think Raine Maida watches the world?" I was like, I don't know, but it was confirmed in this moment. It's confirmed when you say you want to work with the TV on the radio guy. I mean, it's confirmed that you're out there with a creative and you have a conscious. You're putting conscious effort into your curiosity, which to me sounds bloody exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about multitudes, right? It really is trying to exist on those levels where you're bringing in inspiration from all these different levels. And I think it just goes back to being open. And it's not something I could say. There's moments where I wasn't open to that collaboration. But it all started, when we moved out to LA in 2000, where I live on the 405. There's a place not too far from here, and Brian Eno was speaking, and it was amazing. I went to see him. I'm Brian Eno fan, from stuff he's done with U2 to Bowie to, Talking Heads, all that stuff. But this wasn't a music thing. This was like about, this other part of him, and the psychology of collaboration was what he was basically talking about. And I sat in the back of the room, and he just said the importance of challenging yourself, even if it's, this was an example he gave, is if you've written a new piece of music, bring someone in just to sit in the back corner. Your brain will synapse differently just having someone in there. Not that they're judging your work, but it's just, we're humans, right? There's an insecurity of being an artist, to putting something out there, to creating something for someone to listen and essentially judge whether they are or not. And so that changed my whole definition of like what I see collaboration as. And so I'm just looking for that everywhere. I look for it on the tech side. My co-founder, a Fan Drop, is an incredibly creative guy. We have amazing conversations on moving product forward, how we make this better for artists. On the music side, working with people like Dave Siddick. And on the music side as well, trying to find new music that inspires you. And sometimes you just get hit with it. And I can't remember where I was, somewhere in Ontario driving around, and Tokyo Summer came on, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And obviously ends up that it's you and a bunch of great Canadian musicians, and, introduced to the Mounties from that song. But that song in particular, I was like, this is maybe as perfect as you get to a pop song. And A, I loved that it was Canadian, but B, it's just like, I don't know, music is still so incredible to me in terms of, we all know the psychology of what it can do for elderly people that are suffering from like dementia or Alzheimer's. Like there's all this science to music, and I still feel that intimately when I hear music that really affects me. And so I think that's why I've never been an artist that gets stuck in terms of, like I said, probably to a detriment from a commerce side, but never repeating yourself or trying to repeat yourself. And that's because I'm always like inspired by new music. It's like, how did you write Tokyo Summer? How does all that stuff work? And it sounds so fresh and vibrant. And I think it's one of those songs that will sound like that 50 years from now. That's like such an incredible accomplishment. So not to dissect things too much, but I think on those levels, and like I said, it comes down to multitudes, and I wake up inspired every day. And I think the thing about tech is, not to go off on a tangent here, but
I love it.
What's really exciting about tech to me is it doesn't have this finite value. Like even with Fan Drop, we built this platform. I'm testing it with different artists with my band. I can go back and change things. A song kind of is what it is. So there's something actually more romantic about building, something that, we're trying to help musicians, but it's this app or platform where it is organic and dynamic and changing, where a song kind of, we put it out there and it defines us, and it is what it is, and you can go write another one, but you can't really change that piece of art for what it is, for good or, for good or for bad. But I do love tech for that ability to change it on the fly.
Real quick, when I was listening to Stop Making Stupid People Famous this morning, like I said, it's on our local station all the time, so I've heard it a lot. But really listening to it in the headphones at the gym this morning, and I had the same feeling. Like I wanted to reverse engineer how it was built. Like I have that same curiosity of like, there's a lot of genius sort of put in there, and it can pass by you on the radio, and you're not fully aware of all the the intrinsic melodies that are happening. I guess I'm curious about how did OLP, like, so you're like a powerful lyricist. Like I don't know why the Nazi breastfeeding lyric always comes to mind. Like, because it's I remember hearing that lyric on the radio and thinking like, it's so peculiarly humanizing. Like that idea has come from a truly dynamic mind. So here's my question. How does OLP write songs? Like, is it these guys are starting with a beat and a chord progression? You're sitting there with a pad of paper? Like, again, like as creators who do this same kind of thing, I have the same feeling when I listen to you. It's like, I want to reverse engineer how they got here with all these nifty melodies. I hear you trying new things vocally as well. I feel like you have even a greater comfort in your upper ranges at the moment. At least that's what I hear on this record. So again, I'm curious to want to reverse engineer what I hear also. So can you give us a little window into even the first few steps of how this thing gets made?
Yeah, I mean, so walking along downtown LA, probably like 5 or 6 years ago now, there's an incredible street artist here, and he'd spray painted "Stop Making Stupid People Famous" on a mailbox with a stencil, and I was like, damn. If that is not the most profound thing I've seen, the politics, the culture of fame that we've had over the last 10 years with social media and stuff, it just feels like that's like there's something so incredibly poignant and relevant for that statement. I was like, man, that feels like a song, not just a stencil. But it always felt like I can always fall on the side of pretension too easily when I'm walking that fence. So I was like, I'm not doing that this time. I really want to find something that diffuses that statement, makes it more fun and upbeat. Talking Heads were great at that, obviously. And so I was kind of just kept it, it was just filtering. And I think we made a record that didn't find anything that fit it. And then during COVID, we really didn't have the chance to get together as an artist as a band with OLP. And so we would, Steve lives out here with me, the guitar player, and Duncan and Jason are in Toronto, and they would get together and send like, riffs and grooves and stuff. And one groove they sent, I was like, oh, this is like almost dancey. I think this could be the right thing for this lyric. So one of those amazing moments where I put up the groove they sent. It's just bass and drums, but that song just flew out of me in a second. All the melodies, all the parts, and took it to Dave, and he obviously fell in love with it and decided to work with us. But sometimes I think you have to wait. Like I think every song that I've written or we've written as a band, that you force it, you never like it. So I've learned to have some patience. Like, make sure the right thing is fitting with the right thing. It's not that you can't force a square into a round hole, and I've definitely been guilty of that. But Stop Making Stupid People Famous found its footing with the right kind of color in the groove they sent. So pretty simple.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, 2 last things, and then I'm going to let you be. You moved to LA in 2000. Could you be you in Canada, do you think? Could you be the person you are in the place you are right now? Like, does Canada offer the same opportunities that America does? Or in order to establish these tech brands, to be writing for, other artists that we know, could you have done that from Toronto?
I think you can do it now. I don't think you could do it 20 years ago. I think that's the difference. Tech wasn't as big in Canada. There wasn't a lot of support for it. There wasn't a lot of funding. Even getting into the business side, like VCs weren't very supportive of new tech ideas and startups. And then the songwriting thing was the same. It wasn't as much opportunity. I think that's all changed, and cliche, but the globalization, prospect of that we sit in today is made, you can, this works anywhere now. I still love Toronto. It's obviously where I was born. We have a place there. I'm there all the time. So I think, to your point, I could move back and still do all the same stuff today. Just wasn't viable 20 years ago.
Lastly, I've been thinking, I've been on a major spiritual rebuild. Anybody listening to this podcast is going to get sick of me, the fact that I keep saying that, but it's intrinsic to sort of what has brought me to this moment. And I guess hearing the Kurzweil quotes in the record and the idea of the spiritual machine, I've been listening to different channels who are channeling, sixth dimensional beings who are talking about the future of consciousness. Are you thinking about this stuff?
Yeah, just being at South by, Ray Kurzweil was there, and he basically said, I can't remember something. He did a podcast with Joe Rogan when he was down there, but he also did a big panel, and he kind of said, like, he's been talking about this for years, obviously, but 2029 is that turning point, right? Where
Singularity.
Turing tests, we hit that state, and so he basically said, if you can live another 5 years, you might be able to live for 500. And I think that's a big concept. Like the first time we brought Raine to Toronto to do those interstitials on spiritual machines, and the first one, he sat down at dinner with Mike and I, and he brought out like your grandma's pill boxes like this. His was like this, and he said, "Please don't mind me. I'm just going to take these pills every few minutes while we're eating." And he probably ended up over the course of a 3-hour dinner and like 2 bottles of wine, took 100 pills, and I was just like, Ray, what's going on? But his propensity to extend life, to see all his theories about consciousness through are really fascinating. And I have to say, we did Spiritual Machines 2 basically to put a timestamp on Spiritual Machines 1, evaluate. He had all these predictions. Where'd we end up? Like 90% of them came true. And the other ones that weren't true, they actually were, or most of them, they just, by virtue of, he's a scientist, so he's like, I was off on driverless cars by 4 years. So that was like a no. I was like, what do you mean? It's happening. Yeah, it's a little bit behind, but you're still right about it. Cochlear implants, like all this stuff, even if you're off by a year, but he's a scientist, so he felt like it didn't rate. But everything he's saying about the future and consciousness is, how does it not come true? He's been on the money. He's right. And so the next 10 years being on this planet, when you talk about spirituality versus consciousness and where that intersects, I think it's like we are living in the most exciting time in human history.
I agree. I feel like since I've sort of hipped to these people who are channeling other dimensional beings, which, might sound crazy to you, it might sound crazy to people who are listening. To me, it fills my heart with a warm glow. I spent a lot of my life in fear of the future, in fear of losing my life. Mm-hmm. I feel like I predicated a majority of my fuel and energy was fear. And I feel like I've done a lot of cleaning around that, and I'm not interested in fear anymore. I also don't know how to feel about a cyborg future, or a future where consciousness isn't necessarily carried in a purely organic bag, if you know what I mean. Like, where is consciousness going? What is going to contain consciousness in the future? Are you thinking about this stuff? You must be.
Yeah, singularity is a big concept, right? So the fact that that's going to happen in 2029, according to Ray, I think it can be scary, but I think it's also, it's our ego. I don't want to get into religion, but the idea that we think, we're the end all be all, or the end of evolution, like it's not. It's been proven, that we're in the middle of it, or maybe at the beginning of it. So what does a human or consciousness look like, my God, like not hundreds, but thousands of years from now? And I think the natural ability to extend life, which we've been doing all the way through, extend lifespans, and now now it's become exponential, like computing, right? So I think it's fascinating. I think it's really exciting. There's, like I said, with all technology, there's always a downside. Hopefully it's not this dystopian future like we could all see in films, and we get fed in terms of, what AI and everything can do. But at the core of it, just the ability to reach singularity during a lifetime, to me, is like mad exciting. It's crazy.
You're a positive person.
Yeah, I'm total optimist. Absolutely.
And always have been.
Yeah. Or at least I'm able to like bury the negative stuff, but I always kind of wake up like not a I guess I am, like I do follow stoicism and Taoism as well, where it's like you can only control the things you can control. And I think just living by that simple idea just makes me more positive than not.
Okay, I said 2 questions. That was 2. I do want to let you go. One last thing about marriage. rock and roll and a long-term marriage, those two things are in some ways antithetical. You have a long-term marriage. I have been married for 14 years. To me, I wouldn't be myself. I wouldn't feel invigorated by a power if I didn't have an authentic sort of loving base from which to kind of attack the world. I've never sort of been somebody who needs to have like a complete sexual freedom or whatever in order to feel like an artist. I feel more like an artist as a married man, I think, than I did not as a married man. Do you have any thoughts on this being married in rock and roll? Like I said, it kind of rubs against the archetype ever so slightly.
Yeah, so I've never bought into that. I even hate the word rock star. Like I never felt I was that. I never wanted to be that. I never wanted to be associated with that. And again, like some of the decisions on a creative level, you can call marriage a creative decision when you're a young artist that's kind of blowing up, where that's probably, I think someone said it to me. Most people probably said it behind my back or voiced concern to my manager, is like, oh, he shouldn't get married. Like that's going to put a dent in his career. You know, it's like, fuck you. Marriage is the most fulfilling, besides having kids, one of the most fulfilling parts and things that I'm proud of as a human, never mind an artist. Like Chantel is a bigger part of me than I'm a part of me, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't work without her in my mind. And so in terms of the work it takes, 100%. But that's like anything. Like no one says, hey, can we be excellent at marriage? But why isn't that a goal? Like it baffles me. But like anything, you need the tools to be able to achieve that. So that's something we work really hard at. But yeah, marriage is, I don't like, I think what you said, I don't know where or who I'd be without it.
Thank you so much for this chat. It's been an honor, and I'm grateful, even for that email you sent all those eons ago. And then you actually followed up again with another, you weighed in on the Mounties' second record. God bless you. No one heard that record except for you and 3 other people.
Where's the third one? Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Where is it? We're wondering if we want to make it or not. Bless you, Raine Maida.
Let me help get everyone in a room at least.
Hey,
you guys need to make a third record, man.
Be afraid that we might take you up on that. Thanks so much for this chat. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
The Stumble Forward is an Isadora Media production and is hosted by Hawksley Workman and produced by Jennifer Kavanaugh. Be sure to subscribe and follow The Stumble Forward. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/Hawksley Workman. Thank you for listening.
Stumble forward, the stumble forward.